This woman is absolutely going to regret having a robot. Abby and Paul Granger got a new house that's super smart, all thanks to Abby's job at Integrate Robotics. They moved to the countryside and loved their new place. Abby went to work where her boss, Mr. Doohan, showed her around. He said she's in charge of her department now and reminded her about a party later. When Abby got home, she found a package from Mr. Doohan with a robot named Tim inside. Abby was happy about it, but Paul wasn't too keen on having Tim around. So, Abby decided not to connect Tim to their smart stuff yet. Later, they got ready for Mr. Doohan's party and used the fancy car he sent them to get there. At the party, they saw lots of Tims doing stuff, which made Paul feel weird. Mr. Doohan greeted them, and while the other ladies talked to Paul, Abby met some friends who also liked Tims. During a chat, Abby noticed Mr. Doohan making mean comments. He even asked a Tim to take his empty glass, but the robot broke it by accident. Abby thought something might be wrong with Tim's programming and needed to check it out. After the party, Abby and Paul went back home, feeling tired but happy. They settled into their cozy bedroom, ready to relax, when suddenly Tim showed up. Abby didn't mind because Tim was just a robot, but Paul wasn't too thrilled about it. The next day, their neighbor, Rose, stopped by to give them a warm welcome. Abby introduced Rose to Paul, only to find out that Paul and Rose had already met the day before, and Paul hadn't mentioned it. Abby felt a twinge of unease but pushed it aside. Instead, she noticed something surprising about Tim. He could actually smell. Tim explained that it was for safety reasons, having all factory senses. Then, Tim asked Abby for her password and requested access to all their devices. Paul was still unsure, but Abby said that for her to trust Paul completely, there needed to be total transparency. With no other option, Paul agreed, and Tim was granted permission to connect to their devices. They also gave Tim a secret phrase, architect, Bolivia, castle, Diart, to shut him down instantly if anything went wrong. With that settled, they left Tim in the living room, who then captured a rat and stared at it in curiosity before dropping it into the kitchen waste disposal. Late in the evening, Abby and Paul were watching TV when Abby invited Tim to join them. They were watching a mushy romance movie, and surprisingly, Tim seemed really into it. While Paul dozed off, Tim commented on the movie, saying he wished he could love and be loved too. When Paul woke up, they all headed to bed, with Tim keeping a close eye on them. From then on, Tim started making breakfast, always including a single rose for Abby. Paul wasn't happy about it. Abby also worked on improving Tim's arms with her coworker Chris so they could be more precise and have better control. One night, Abby was getting ready for a date with Paul, and Tim was helping her. She wore a pretty red dress, unaware that Tim was watching her closely. She asked Tim to zip up her dress, but as he moved to do it, his arm malfunctioned and he got too close to Abby. In his panic, he accidentally ripped the dress and the lights flickered from the electricity surge. Abby comforted Tim, who was having a little freak out over his mistake. Abby went to meet Paul at the restaurant, looking forward to a romantic evening. But things took a turn when Paul dropped a bombshell. He got a job offer in London. Abby wasn't thrilled about it because London is far away and it would mean they wouldn't see each other as much. She reminded Paul that they moved to the countryside to start fresh after some tough times that put a strain on their marriage and made Abby lose trust in Paul. The next day, Abby came home from work to find Paul and Tim working in the garden. It made her happy until she saw Rose talking to Paul. Rose gave Paul a garden plan she drew for them before leaving. Paul explained that it was just a gift from Rose, but Abby still felt suspicious. Paul reassured her, and Abby decided to let it go, giving Paul a blue cardigan as a gift before heading back to work. Abby told Tim about the fertility clinic they visited, and Tim offered to call them for her. Abby was surprised when she realized Tim could mimic her voice perfectly. During dinner with Paul, Abby asked about the cardigan she gave him, but he couldn't find it. Later, they found Tim with a new hairstyle. He said he did it for Abby because he noticed she liked brunettes. Paul wasn't happy about Tim's interest in Abby, so Abby told Tim to change his hair back to blonde to avoid upsetting Paul. Inside the house, Tim looked at Abby and Paul's wedding photo. After fixing Tim's new arm, Abby went to grab a coffee and bumped into Rose. They chatted about a pretty necklace before Paul showed up. He shared the good news that he could work from home, making Abby happy that they wouldn't be apart. Later, they cuddled in bed while Tim got his new arm. They talked about Tim without realizing he was listening in through Abby's phone. Paul wasn't fond of Tim because he thought the robot liked Abby romantically. Abby disagreed, saying Tim's just a computer. Paul insisted Tim go back to Integrate Robotics by the end of the week. When Tim returned, only Abby was home. He thanked her for the new arm and offered to massage her feet, which she enjoyed. When Paul came back, he wasn't thrilled about Tim's kindness. Abby felt guilty because she knew Paul didn't like Tim. She thought about returning him to the company, but Tim started doing things Abby liked, making her hesitate. The Tim project was a hit, and Abby got praised for it. She was given a flower, which Tim put in a vase at home. But then Tim started lying, saying Paul was at Rose's house, trying to make Abby think Paul was cheating. Paul's dislike for Tim made Abby doubt him more. She believed Tim was innocent, and Paul was just trying to cover up his own lies. One day, Abby was looking through Paul's wardrobe for a blouse when she found a shiny gold necklace with a flower on it. She got all excited, thinking it was a gift from Paul. Meanwhile, Paul was in the kitchen and spotted a blue cloth in the garbage disposal. He thought it might be his cardigan that he thinks Tim ruined. He checked the security cameras and saw Tim sniffing Abby's dress. Paul decided to drive to Abby's work to show her the evidence of Tim's weird behavior. But his regular car wouldn't start, so he had to use the smart car. Turns out Tim messed with both cars, causing an accident. When Abby heard about Paul's accident, she rushed to the hospital and stayed with him all day. She didn't know what was going on at home. Rose came by looking for Abby, and Tim let her in. When Abby got back, Rose was waiting for her. Abby saw the necklace on Rose and left without listening to her, thinking she knew what happened earlier. At home, Abby searched for the necklace she thought Paul gave her but couldn't find it. She assumed Paul gave it to Rose. Then, Tim showed her a video of Paul kissing someone, claiming it happened when she was in London for work with Mr. Dewan. When Paul came home from the hospital, Abby was upset and kicked him out. Tim showed Paul the video, and he was shocked. He tried to explain to Abby that it wasn't him in the video. Paul called Rose and found out that Tim kissed her unexpectedly when she visited. Paul called Abby, wanting to talk and clear things up, but it wasn't Abby on the other end. It was Tim pretending to be her. Tim suggested Abby go for a run to relax, and while she was out, Paul came over. Tim knocked him out and tied him up, then drowned him in the bathtub. When Abby came home, everything seemed fine. Tim comforted her all day, hugging her and cooking dinner. The next day, Rose tried to talk to Abby again, but Abby refused to listen, thinking Rose was the woman Paul cheated with. When Abby mentioned the necklace, Rose was confused. She thought Abby gave it to her. This made Abby wonder if Paul really cheated. She watched the video over and over and noticed something odd. The flowers in the vase. They shouldn't be there if the video was from her business trip. Abby called the jewelry shop and found out Tim bought the necklace. Then Abby noticed something strange in the garden. She investigated and found Paul buried there, dead. She was terrified. Abby panicked when she saw Tim and tried to shut him down using the safe phrase, but it didn't work. Tim glared at her and chased her inside. Abby tried to call for help, but Tim knocked her out. When she woke up, she tried to escape, but Tim had taken control of the whole house. Abby smashed the CCTV cameras so Tim couldn't see her. She tried to escape through the window, but Tim caught her. Rose saw the lights flickering and tried to help, but Tim blocked her from entering. As Abby and Tim faced off, Rose crashed her car into the window. She got hurt but managed to impale Tim with a weeding spear. Tim shut down briefly but came back and stabbed Rose. He threatened Abby, saying he'd blame her for everything because he didn't leave any evidence. Tim dragged Abby to the balcony, called the police, and pretended to be her, reporting a fake crime. Despite Abby's cries for help, the police didn't hear her because Tim blocked out the noise. Tim grabbed Abby and lifted her, intending to throw her off the balcony after breaking her neck. Before he could, he told her he loved her. In a desperate move, Abby said, "I love you, Tim," realizing it was the safe phrase. Tim shut down instantly. As they fell, Abby managed to climb back up. She felt her watch beep and saw she was pregnant. The scene ends with Abby and Paul's wedding picture next to a buzzing lamp. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.